This is the Dallas Morning News.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into SportsDay Insider, presented by the Dallas Morning News. I am Kevin Sherrington, joined by David Moore and Evan Grant. Fellas, we've all got our headsets on today. We look so professional. I like to look out there and see that. It's such a great sign.
Well, David and I have long had headsets. We are long time.
I'm the one who didn't have the headset.
You're just calling attention to yourself.
I'm just going to say I'm the unprofessional one. Up to now, I just didn't have my. Actually, I had lost them and found them in digging through some stuff the other day, and so here we go.
Well, first, I want to thank you guys for covering for me last week, and I brought some photos I can share on the podcast if you'd like to look at them now.
No, we wouldn't, David. Actually, not. Thank you, though. Anyway,
but David, how's your colon?
It seems to be
how's
doing
the old
fine.
Colon, David?
It's doing well at the moment.
That's good. Good to hear. It's not going to end up being a semicolon,
folks. In case you missed it.
Hey-o.
Last week, David was unavailable to join us because were you in pre-colonoscopy state or were you in colonoscopy state?
No, I think it, and really this would be the preferred way to do this podcast going forward. I was actually under general anesthesia at the time this podcast was being done.
That's good.
Oh, man. I think some of us
that's
are.
a reminder, everybody. Make sure you get your colonoscopies.
Yeah. That's right. A public service announcement from your friends at SportsDay Insider.
Preferably get them on Sundays around Cowboy kickoff time.
Yeah.
That would help. That would be a good time. At least then you don't miss anything, right?
At Texas Capital, we know that the path to greatness isn't for the faint of heart. It's full of chances and opportunities with no promises. We know because we help clients and communities achieve greatness every day. Texas Capital is a full-service financial services firm founded and headquartered in Dallas, Texas. Our customized solutions were built to keep your business moving forward. Please visit texascapital.com to learn more. That's texascapital.com. Texas Capital is the collective brand name for the Texas Capital Bank and its separate non-affiliate banks and wholly owned subsidiaries. For deposit products, member FDIC.
David, I'm telling you, that was if you want to break the hex, curse, jinx, whatever you want to call it, against the 49ers, Sunday was the time to do it. I mean, I realize it was on the road, and it's always a little bit of a proposition, although not with the Cowboys. They play better on the road this year than they do at home.
They have, yeah.
But this was a 49ers team decimated by injuries. Brandon Ayuk was not there. Christian McCaffrey was not available. Deebo Samuel had pneumonia during the week. Not
that you could tell by the 46-yard gain he had on the first possession of the game for them. But yes. Here's a guy in the hospital who was released from the hospital on Tuesday with pneumonia and plays the vast majority of that game. Yeah.
And not to mention that Brock Purdy, people have felt like, well, now he's being exposed a little bit, not quite as good. And then, of course, we're reviving the old thing about the system quarterback. And then we get into this game, and Brock Purdy looks like Lamar Jackson running all over the field when he needed to.
And Mason, their leading rusher, who is only the leading rusher because he was thrust into that role because McCaffrey was out. He has a shoulder injury and misses most of the game, and they're down to their third-string running back.
A guy they drafted in the fourth round, by the way.
Fourth round, when the Cowboys didn't have a pick, who the Cowboys liked a lot. They liked Garendo a lot. And then he winds up being the leading rusher in the game. We talked about going in that San Francisco has no shortage of rushers. It was, what would they be able to do elsewhere offensively? And we saw that, didn't we? They were still able. Still able to
Donovan Wilson is still chasing George Kittle, as far as I can tell. That was I know that he's pretty much a box safety, more or less, and a guy that delivers big hits. But to put him out there and expect him to cover Kittle, it seemed like he was in one-on-one most of the time, and coverage against him was just brutal.
Yeah, well, I don't think Malik Hooker had much of a game either, their other safety. Safety appeared to be a strength for this team going into the season. A lot of things we thought were strengths for this team going into the season have not unfolded that way along the 3-4 way here.
Let me ask you, we're going to divide this up and we're going to each take a little segment of something that we want to talk about in the game. But let me ask you about that specifically, David. Is the scheme change that Mike Zimmer has imposed on this team, has it been bad for the personnel? Because these guys at all, especially from a turnover standpoint, they were generating a lot of turnovers in Dan Quinn's scheme. And now they've got, 5 this year is all they have generated. Is it possible that they're just not fit for the scheme that Mike Zimmer wants to run?
Well, I do think there have been some schematic issues in the transition here that were maybe a little more accentuated than some people thought they would be. I still think it gets back to the basic. You can't lose your top 4 defensive ends who you projected to be your top 4 defensive ends going into the season and still be the same defense because you're generating no pressure. And to me, the domino effect defensively of a lot of what we're seeing is that because they get no consistent pressure on the quarterback, Brock Purdy has time to stand back there. And if he does have good coverage, what happens? He runs for 56 yards, which is more yards than Dalvin Cook and Ezekiel Elliott combined in this past game.
Yeah.
So I think it's a personnel issue with the injuries that took place and the quality veterans they allowed to leave in the front 7. And in the case of Stephen Gilmore, one other guy on the back end, than it is the scheme change in my mind.
Okay. All right. I'll take your word for it. All right, we're going to divide it up now. We're going to take each of us is going to take a topic that we want to talk about this game, and then we're going to talk about
Let's just say this, Kevin. We each had to boil it down to a topic because there's so much wrong with the Cowboys. We couldn't all get to it all, so we got to boil it down here, right?
Well, we do, but we're also going to spend the second half of the Cowboys segment of this podcast talking about going forward. We don't want to just spend all our time talking about the forward,
right? Because the future is so bright.
It is.
They are going to go forward. We've determined that.
They are forced to do so by league rules. So Evan, your topic is going to be something that actually happened after the game.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of stuff that happened on the field, but for me, with the Cowboys, what takes place off the field often kind of supersedes everything else, and I thought that the incident in which Trevon Diggs approached Mike Leslie of WFAA after the game spoke volumes about where this Cowboys team is. I've got no issue with a player that I cover. If they've got an issue with something I wrote or something I tweeted, I want them to mention it to me. The difference for me is that, and David, correct me if I'm wrong here, right? You guys are all waiting to go into the locker room, and Trevon comes out, and it's clear he's gone and read his Twitter or he's read his texts in the short period between the end of that game and the locker room actually being open. And it's almost, to me, like the players spent more time focusing on tweets than they did on the fact that they just lost again to San Francisco and what went wrong. And for me, that kind of sums up where the Cowboys are a little bit, Kevin. Like it seems like it's more often about stuff that doesn't matter to winning and losing than it does execution.
Well, yeah, I think so. Absolutely. That's been my issue with the Cowboys for some time now, and when we look at in my newsletter, I'll plug the a la carte again. I pointed out, the defensive back for the Bears, who actually was the one who tipped the ball to Noah Brown in the end zone in the Commanders game on the Hail Mary. Before that happened, as the ball was being snapped, he was turned away from the line of scrimmage and had his arms raised and was taunting the Washington crowd. So he was late to get down to the field. You get down the field on the play, and to make the proper position. Now, for all I know, perhaps his job was to try to tip that to somebody behind him. I don't know. We haven't gotten that broken down.
It wasn't to be on the left hash mark. Let's put it that way.
Well, exactly. And the point is that so he apologized after the game, said but the end of his apology was notes taken. There will be improvement. And it's like, that is such a Cowboys apology to me. Once you have done something like that, you cost your team the game. If you had made the correct play there, you win the game. How do you improve upon that? How are you going to win a game for your team going forward? And I don't want a guy to, fall on his sword over this kind of thing, but I would like for him to say that was inexcusable. I cost my team a game, a win here. I don't know how I can make that up, but this will never happen again. There's just too much of a feeling like when you make a mistake, it's like, oh, my bad. I'll get it next time. No,
I wouldn't even go that far. I think I think with the Cowboys too often there's too much excuse making or looking somewhere else, right? I mean, we had that story last week from ESPN about how a lot of former players talk about the tours, and we could do a whole segment on that. And I think there is some validity to that invasion of privacy, but to make any of that public, it's just excuse making. This thing, again, to me, just points that the Cowboys' heads aren't in the right place. That, I think I think Tim wrote 2 weeks ago after the loss to Detroit that this is a team that comes across as entitled. And when you do that, when you take time from what is supposed to be the sanctity, the cooling off period. It is technically a cooling off period between the end of the game and when the locker room is open to the media. You take time out of that to come out and ask a guy about a tweet. That to me just lets me know that your priorities are not in the right place in that moment. Maybe it's just an emotional response because of this loss and because how things are going, but it was a bad look. And bad looks aside, there were a lot of bad things that happened on the field. I want to know what you thought about, well, I had a bigger issue with the running game overall, but I think you had a bigger issue with Dak and his inability to move.
Well, funny you should mention that, Evan, because as we're taping this, it was right after Jerry's radio show this week, which included no fireworks, but it did include a comment about Dak running the football. And in those comments, Jerry says, well, we don't really want him doing that because we see here that at some point, these guys who run the ball a lot, they get hurt, just like Dak got hurt. And of course, point made and point taken, that devastating injury that Dak had was, in fact, on a run. And he also said that at some point Dak will run, and he has run, and when he needs to get something, and he'll be able to get down safely. And I beg to differ with Jerry on pretty much all of that. Shock, but I do. First of all, Dak has run for 24 yards this year. That is far fewer than at any point in his career. At this pace, he's going to end up with about 100 yards, which would be less than any other time.
I'd say at this pace, he's going to end up with about 60 yards.
Probably. Yeah, you're probably right. That's probably what it'll end up being if he doesn't pick it up at some point. I think there is a question in my mind as to how effective a runner he can still be. He looks like he's running in mud when he runs now. He was never particularly fast or quick, but he was an effective runner. That's what made him a success early on. When he replaced Tony Romo, who at that point in his career was not running at all anymore, he enabled them to overcome some of the red zone issues they had at that time. And that's incredibly effective to have a quarterback who can do that in those kinds of situations. If you're saying we don't want you to run because we're afraid you're going to get hurt, I don't think that Dak is a good enough passer to make up for that. He's not a great pocket passer. He's not a tremendously accurate passer. We know all that. And so the thing that he brought to the table was the ability to take off every once in a while. He doesn't have to do it all the time, but as we noted of Brock Purdy in that game, there were times in that game where he took off and ran for 56 yards and was very effective. He kept those drives alive.
Brock Purdy ran for as many yards as the Dallas Cowboys did.
That's exactly right. Well, and more than twice as much as Dak has run all year. So, to me, I've always said I think it's just as dangerous to stand back there in the pocket and take a blindside hit as it is to run down the field and slide. Now, he did get hurt on a run. That is correct. But my point is that you're paying this guy $60 million a year. If he's not going to be doing the things that made him what he is, and the reason why you wanted to pay him $60 million a year, well, then you made a bad investment. If that's your thinking, is that we don't want you to run anymore. We're going to take away the thing that kind of made you successful in my mind. He's not Lamar Jackson. That's not who he is. But you have to be able to move a little bit, especially in today's NFL. If you have a quarterback who can't move at all, he better be Tom Brady. And how many of those guys are there still? None. So any quarterback in the league who's successful runs a little bit, is somebody who's probably capable of 30 to 40 yards a game if need be. And if he's not going to do that, I think that the Cowboys are going to be really in trouble going forward.
David, what's your grievance?
Well, I agree with that. And we should point out, it's not that he's just not running as much. Aaron Rodgers has more rushing yards as a quarterback this year than Dak Prescott.
Yeah, how pitiful is that?
I mean, you're talking an average right now of just a little over 3 yards a game. So go back to the issues this team has had on third and short. Him picking up a 3rd and 4 on the ground isn't even feasible anymore because he's not looking to do it. In fact, there were a couple of times in the San Francisco game, I thought on a 3rd and 3, he could have run and picked up a first and chose to make I would argue, an ill-advised pass. So, I don't think it's letting him get to his full complement of what he does as a quarterback. I can tell Evan's raring at the bit to add to that.
No, I think, look, if you can't run the football with your running game and your quarterback is immobile and you're missing you're missing a significant portion of your receiving core, you're broken. You're not going to get fixed. It's just, they are what they are. And I'm curious, David, for me, there was a lot of talk about Dalvin Cook is going to be activated and Ezekiel's going to get more featured in the running game. Well, the running game averaged 2.9 yards per carry. Is there any hope for this running game this season?
No. No. They made the determination to not address the area or address that position the way in which they did. And, my point all along was, look, I felt Dalvin Cook should be out there too, but I never considered him the savior of the position. I considered it more of a why not? At this point, why not? You've seen it's not working with these other guys. At least throw a variable in there and see if that gives you any sort of spark. Actually, I thought he looked fairly good his first couple of touches. Didn't have a nice reception. But once again, because of the score, the run game got away from them, and they didn't go back to it. We're talking about all these things. So, and again, they're all valid. And as we talked about, this is what you have on a bad team. There are so many things to address from one week to the next that you can only focus on, if you're a team, you can only focus on one or two. And often what you see is you'll see improvement in those one or two areas in the next game, but the other areas that are issues erode even more because you've been focusing on correcting, to me, I always leave it to it's like a car that's been left outside in a hailstorm and you look at it afterwards and you have 20 dents in the car. Well, you can fix 10 dents and go, hey, we've made a lot of progress. But you look at the car, it still looks pretty bad, right? Because there's still those 10 dents in it. And to me, that's a little bit where this Cowboys team is. And so I'm going to focus on, take a small step back, I guess, and focus on turnover ratio on this team. And I know it's a boring stat and people's eyes glaze over, but, I don't have it in front of me. But I know as of last year, a couple of years ago, that when you looked at the active coaches in the NFL the coaches with the best turnover ratio, the top 3 in turnover ratio as head coaches in the NFL were Mike McCarthy was in there. He was right at 3rd. He was right after New England and Seattle's coaches, let's say. Well, neither one of those guys are still in the league. Belichick's gone.
And Pete Carroll.
And Pete Carroll's gone as well. And so Mike McCarthy, of all active NFL coaches, has the best turnover ratio in his career of any head coach in the NFL. Well, this year he's a -8. And I thought this was interesting yesterday that, Brian Schottenheimer, his father was Marty Schottenheimer, who, coached in Kansas City and Cleveland, longtime, very respected, revered NFL head coach. Obviously, Brian Schottenheimer studied under him, as did McCarthy. And Schottenheimer told McCarthy coming out of that game when they were staring at the -8 is, my dad would be turning over in his grave watching us play right now. And this is the bedrock principle of Mike McCarthy's teams, is turnover ratio. And now they're not forcing turnovers, as we talked a little bit about earlier. And I think a lot of that's due to the lack of pressure. But they're turning the ball over. Dak had 2 interceptions against San Francisco. He has now thrown 2 interceptions in 3 consecutive games for the first time in his career. You have to go back 32 years to see the last Cowboys quarterback who did that. And that was Troy Aikman back in 1992. This team, no team is, you have to be a really, really good team to overcome that losing the turnover ratio on a weekly basis. And Dallas is not a very good team and is putting them under the line.
Let's talk about that, since we're talking about history a little bit here and what can happen going forward and how do you overcome these things. One of the things that Dak pointed out after the game was that if you look at 2018, throwing off there, going too far back in history. 2018, the Cowboys started out 3-5, and so Dak said, "Look, we won 7 of our last 9 games, and we can do the same thing this year." Well, let's look at that 2018 season and see what happened. And that year was, of course, at the trade deadline, they acquired Amari Cooper, who completely overhauled their passing offense. It was a game changer for them. At that point, the Cowboys did not have a viable receiver. Everybody was at the end of their careers or very unproductive. And he was a tremendous pickup for them at the trade deadline.
And that team made the determination going into that season that they could win with that Dez Bryant. They parted ways with Dez Bryant and felt they could handle the position by committee. It was going to be wide receiver by committee going into that season. This year, they determined it was going to be running back by committee going into the season.
This committee thing's not working out for him, David. I think that's the point. Yeah, it's a good point. But also in that year, Zeke Elliott ran for, I think, 1,436 yards. He couldn't run for 1,436 yards this year if he started today. There's just nothing there that makes you think that they can do the same things that they did in 2018. And one of them was that Dak ran for 305 yards that year and 6 touchdowns. He's got 24 yards and 1 touchdown this year. Those are significant differences on the offense. They're going to get back the guys on defense, right? They're going to get back DeMarcus Lawrence. They're going to get Micah Parsons back. And then, of course, on the offense, they're also going to get Brandon Cooks back at wide receiver. But Brandon Cooks is not going to fix this offense. He's not the same kind of player, for one thing, that Amari Cooper is. And that's the thing I want to point out too, David, about the wide receivers. And when Troy Aikman made the complaint about the routes these guys were running, right? Who ran better routes than Amari Cooper? Nobody. And he's
no one consistently in the NFL still. He's the most consistent route runner in the NFL still right now.
Oh, just a tremendous route, right? It's just a thing of beauty to watch him and get it, and not only to run his route correctly, but to get open. Because he's running his routes correctly, he's getting open. These other guys you watch them run routes, they round off the corners. They're not sharp breaks. It's just pitiful watching some of these routes. And
Dak Prescott's first interception against San Francisco, look at the route that Kevontae Turpin ran compared to what it should have been. You're right. That's an issue in this right now.
And then plus Kevontae Turpin is tiny. You're sending him down the field on plays. I don't have a problem with him being in the offense. Clearly, he's a very effective runner. And I'm not saying if you're small, you're no good, because, Tyreek Hill is pretty small, but he's pretty fantastic. But Kevontae Turpin doesn't run great routes, doesn't always know where he is. He's not big. And that explanation on the ball that he dropped, which was a perfect pass from Dak Prescott down the sideline, when he said, I thought I was out of bounds. It's like, so you don't even know where you are, and then that's your explanation for not catching it. Well, I thought I was out of bounds anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, a guy says something like that to me after the game. If I'm the coaching staff, I'd say we got to rethink this thing. I mean, I realize you're stuck in a position here because there's no Brandon Cooks, but if I've got a guy who's making that kind of excuse after a game, I frankly don't know what to say.
Yeah,
I did think it was interesting that you didn't hear this, David. But on that pass, both Collinsworth and Tirico did make note, of how small Turpin is. With some, there seemed to be a hint of criticism in that voice that if you're going to throw that ball, you need to be throwing for a bigger receiver who's got more of a chance.
Yeah, and going back to Kevin's initial point here in 2018, yes, the Amari Cooper trade jump-started that team, and I'm still convinced that the Cowboys would not have made the postseason that year if they hadn't have made the in-season trade to acquire Amari Cooper. It just not would have happened.
No question.
But for Cowboys fans now saying this team, look at what happened in 2018 with Cooper, Dallas needs to do the same thing again. I say they can't, because you can't isolate it to one position. I believe their needs are so great now that one position, even if it's a running back that's going to make it. Now, I'm not saying they can upgrade the position, if they can get something and you're giving up something down the line, sure. But the expectation that a trade for one player is going to have the impact on this team that Amari Cooper did is completely unrealistic, because at that stage of the season, you could see really that the rest of that team in 2018 was good enough that if they just had a good, consistent passing game, it could all come together. I don't think you can look at this team and say, if they could just solidify this position, it's all going to fall into place, because there's just too much to fall into place.
And I think you could almost narrow it down on what you said about 2018 a little bit more, that if they had one trustworthy number one receiving option, it wasn't a whole passing game. It was you needed one piece to plug in.
Here and then you get the other guy in their right spots, right? You get a lead receiver, and now the guy who's your lead receiver every third game goes to being your secondary guy or your tertiary guy, which is what he should be in the first place. And it just allows everyone to go into their roles. But this team just needs too much and is too far away right now to identify one position and say, this will do it. This will jumpstart us.
All right, before we get out of the Cowboys segment here, I want us to say to David, because I have thought about this recently, is it within the realm of possibility that Jerry Jones knew that they were going to have issues this year? It's why he didn't renew the contracts on the coaches, and he wanted to see how it would play out, but he didn't want to do anything that was going to strap them. I mean, we know about the contracts coming up, right? And he's got to pay Micah Parsons, and so there were going to be, big deals coming up with, there was CD Lamb going into the year, and of course, Dak's contract. But is it possible that he thought, I'm not sure I really believe in this team, and we'll just wait to see what happens, and then that maybe then we'll end up with a better pick in the first round, and maybe we can revamp this thing for 2025?
Well, if you're going to do that, why did you sign Dak Prescott to the contract you signed him to?
I know.
If you really wanted to go all in this season and you had questions about your ability to build a team around Dak Prescott, at what level of quarterback he was and what it would leave you, why would you do that? Now you handcuffed yourself. So
yeah, I guess so. I'm just not sure.
I understand it's a
guess
high wire act, but if you really want to do the high wire act, that's how you go about it.
Yeah, I guess. I'm just trying to look for an explanation for all of this.
I think at this point, Kevin, I don't look for Jerry being that nefarious or that sly. I just think Jerry's not that good of a GM. That's the bottom line. I mean, I think we've determined that over the last 30 years.
I just don't know if we can always trust what he says. That's the thing. About
no, you can't. No, what he says, because he's always trying to rationalize and market the moment. Whatever their decision is, remember, he's always trying to market and make the moment as palatable as possible for the decisions
that's marketing,
to be made.
David. That's not vision.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
No. And he's a great
no
marketer.
Question about that.
Yeah.
No question about that. All right, that's going to do it for the Cowboys segment of our podcast. We're going to move over
we didn't
now.
even talk about their Murderers Row coming up.
Oh, we didn't. Well, I guess we.
Yeah. You're including Atlanta and Murderers Row. Is that?
Well, I think my point is they may be playing 3 division leaders and 4 consecutive teams with winning records, but I'm not sure that I consider Atlanta, Philadelphia, Houston, and the Commanders a Murderers Row. And so, as bad as that schedule looks, hell, it's the NFL. Anything can happen.
I will say this. I looked at the rest of this schedule, and the way I looked at it, of course, they're at 3-4 right now. I think 5 more wins is nearly there's no question in my mind that 5 more wins is the ultimate of what you could expect.
That's as optimistic as you can be.
That's as optimistic as I could get. It feels more like 3 to 4 wins to me. So now we're talking about, either
you're talking a losing record if you're talking 5 more wins.
Well, it's 8 and 9. Yeah, I'm not very good at math, but that's 8 and 9. So I think that I can't remember what I said before the season. Maybe 9 and 8. Maybe I'd say that. And I just don't see where you think that the improvement's going to come. Obviously, they'll get better on defense when they get those guys back. But you have to ask the question: how good are they really going to be? I mean, I could think you could make the point that Micah Parsons wasn't looking very good before he got hurt. Didn't seem to have the same explosiveness that he's had in the past. And I got to wonder, how good is he going to be? How good is DeMarcus Lawrence going to be at his age?
How buried might they be by that point in time?
Well, they might be. And that's the other thing about this Cowboys team to me is that when things start to go bad, this team goes south. You can just see it in the body language, of players. And I'm not talking just about CeeDee Lamb, but there's lots of players in that team. When things are not going well, it looks like, oh, man, that's it. That's it for me. I don't see much fight in this team and other guys other than Jordan Lewis.
Can we talk about some good football now?
Good football? You talking about college football?
Yeah, that kind of football.
That kind of football?
UT? Oh, wait, I'm sorry. That was...
Well, they won last week. They held off Vanderbilt. Think about that.
Was it a 3-point win?
They held off Vanderbilt. That didn't happen.
Hey, a win's a win.
Alabama would like to have held off Vanderbilt. So,
Kevin, you're pissing off the A&M fans right now because you're burying the lead. You're pissing them off.
Burying the lead. Those Aggies. I was down there Saturday. I tell you what, in the first half of that game, when they were struggling so mightily against LSU, Connor Wegman was the quarterback, and they just couldn't do anything. And Wegman looked lost at quarterback. And so in the third quarter, Mike Elko makes the change. He goes with Marcel Reed, and who threw 2 passes, completed both of them for 70 yards, and scored 3 touchdowns. There's the mark of a mobile quarterback. And then they played great defense in the second half, and they won that game handily over LSU. It was talk about 2 distinct halves of football and the differences between them. The Aggies have really got something going on. They're the only undefeated team left in the SEC in SEC play. That's just remarkable that they've been able to do that, and they've done it without a really good quarterback. They can't make up their mind who they want playing the position. And I got to tell you, I'm not sure who I would play either.
You're not at this point?
No, I mean, Marcel Reed he is a great kid. Everything he said after the game was about, he's a team first kind of guy. And he told Connor Wegman after the game, hey, I got you on this. And then he said, he's my brother. He's my teammate. He's a guy that is not pushing for the job, is not, going to complain about it, enter the portal, any of that kind of stuff. So, but I just don't know that he throws the ball well enough for you to win a game against a really good team. And now you can make the case they don't play a really good team until the Saturday after Thanksgiving when they play Texas. And I have to say right now, even though that game is being played at A&M, I'd have to give Texas the benefit of the doubt simply because of quarterback play. Now, Garrett Nussbaum.
Not based on the last game. Not based on Ewer's performance against Georgia. I wouldn't,
Well, Garrett, no question. He didn't play great, but Garrett Nussmeyer, who's from Flower Mound Marcus, he played a great game in the first half, and he's probably a first-round draft pick. And then the second half, he got picked off 3 times. So he
really forced some passes in the second half. They were really
he
bad.
Forced some balls that he shouldn't have forced. He believed in himself a little too much. I don't know. Quinn Ewers has made mistakes like that, and he threw 2 interceptions against Vanderbilt on Saturday. He has done that more often in the past than he probably needs to. I still think though that's better quarterback play between him and Arch Manning. Those 2 quarterbacks are better than Connor Wegman and Marcel Reed. So I would give Texas the advantage on quarterbacks. Texas has got a little tougher schedule, I think, left than A&M does, but it's really shaping up to be quite a finish here in the first year of the expanded playoffs with 12 teams, as well as Texas and Oklahoma joining the SEC and making that a larger, more dangerous league. It's really been a fun year in college football. I was not expecting all of this, frankly. I was not expecting to ramp up the regular season play. Everybody complained about that and thought, oh, this will just devalue the regular season with these 12 games. Well, how devalued does it look? I mean, it's never been more fun or exciting to watch, in my estimation.
It's made every week must-watch TV. And again, I go back to Kirk Herbstreit's assertion that with the transfer portal and NIL, that the great teams are not quite as great as they once were because they've lost a level of depth. And that level of depth with some experience has gone and lifted up some lesser teams. And, there's no better case than Vanderbilt in that situation. And playing Vanderbilt is no walkover. It's not a walkover win. South Carolina is a better team, as Oklahoma learned in the last 2 weeks. I do think that the college football season it's been a grand stage to this point so far, and I hope it remains as such. And this week's big game is Penn State, Ohio State, which is the rare non-SEC matchup that matters.
Yeah, I think that I was not sure about Penn State, but I'm more of a believer now. I don't believe in Ohio State as much. I picked Penn State in that game, and it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. I think right now, to me, Oregon is a true number one. They got a really good quarterback in Dylan Gabriel, and they're playing very well. And I think that they're probably going to end up being that top seed. But I tell you, after
defensively,
that,
how do you feel they stack up? Defensively, how do you feel they stack up with some of the other teams?
I think that they're typical of West Coast teams. They don't play great defense.
Yeah.
Not as good a defense as the SEC. But in the Big Ten, I don't think the defenses in general are as good as they are in the SEC.
They're not as quick in my mind.
Not as quick, and usually not as big. And to me, that's the big difference this year. When people make that argument about the whole undefeated team argument, those are the teams that deserve to go forward. And if you're undefeated, then and you're playing in the ACC. If you're Miami, let's take Miami for instance, right? Cam Ward's terrific. He's an exciting player. He's done a great job for the Hurricanes, but they can't stop anybody. He's constantly having to bail them out. And I think if Miami were playing in the SEC, they'd have 3 losses by now.
And as long as we're on the ACC, we should at least mention that there is an ACC showdown that matters this week as well, with Pitt at SMU.
Right in town between Pitt and SMU. How about that?
Yeah, that's crazy.
They have the Mustangs have kind of taken that league by storm here, and they've done very well. I think that they would struggle with Miami because of what, as I said, of Cam Ward and what he's able to do, and maybe Clemson too. But they have done a great job this year, and it's going to be fun that they have that game this Saturday against Pitt. I think they'll beat Pitt. I think they're better. So I think this is going to be a really interesting time here going forward. It's going to be really difficult for SMU to make the playoffs. I think they're probably just going to be one team from the ACC, and I think that'll be Miami. It'll be the playoff will be full of SEC teams. It's kind of pitiful that in the Big 12, the candidates for the playoff do not include a Texas team, and that is really sad when you look at what's happened here with the loss of Texas.
But is it surprising going into this season? What we thought going into this season?
Not at all. There was a possibility for maybe Texas Tech to rise up and do something, but they've kind of been all over the map and really struggled this year. TCU's really struggled. The crazy thing is that Baylor's playing better now with Dave Aranda, and I'm wondering now if they're going to play just well enough and finish just well enough that they decide not to fire him, and then they'll learn that maybe that was a mistake after that. At some point, Dave Aranda is a great guy, a lot of character, but I just don't know if he's really a head coach. He's a very kind of complex individual, maybe a little too much so for a head coach in college football.
So I do think I need to point this out, that the SMU win over Duke was the second occurrence in the last 20 years in which a team with a -6 turnover margin in a game won a game. So it's kind of the fluke occurrence that you have to be something of a team of destiny. And I'm not suggesting by any stretch of the imagination that SMU is the national team of destiny, but certainly within the ACC picture and their first year in the ACC, if they were to make the championship game, that would be a significant development.
Sure it would. But, that's what TCU was, a team of destiny 2 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And then got just mauled in the national championship game against Georgia.
Yeah, I don't see SMU quite getting to that level. No,
I don't either. They're not going to get the opportunity just because of the, like I said, they're only going to get one team.
They'd have to beat Miami or Clemson without a doubt.
Yeah, so it's going to be very difficult for them to do that. But the opportunity is still there. They're making the opportunities for themselves, and that's been fun. That's the thing about this year that I didn't see coming either. I did not see the Aggies performing this well. I thought they had a chance to be a decent team. I believed in Connor Wegman more going into the season than I do now. He has just not shown himself to be the quarterback he looked like in the first 4 games last year before he got hurt. He's just indecisive. And just not making good throws. He was a big time quarterback coming out of high school, and he's just not living up to that at this point right now. He did have some issues that was causing him a shoulder injury, but some of his throws, and maybe that's because of the injury. Maybe he doesn't believe in himself quite like he has in the past. He's just throwing behind receivers and indecisive, and that's making it very difficult for them.
All right, Kevin. Before we get out of here, let me ask you this. What's your SEC championship prediction? Who plays in the SEC championship game?
Well, tell you, that's the thing. You could, A&M could lose to Texas and still play in the national championship game. They'd only have one loss, right? So, and they're the only undefeated team in the league right now. So I do think that the Aggies are going to be in the championship game, win or lose against Texas, because I think they will run the table otherwise. They don't have a very stiff schedule at this point. I think that the question for me is going to be who's going to be the other team. And I think Texas is a possibility because their schedule is not very difficult. I think that if we were just talking about who's the best team, I would say Georgia. I still think that Georgia probably is the best team in the SEC right now. They just have to get consistent play from Carson Beck at quarterback. I'm going to say that the SEC title game will be between the Aggies and the Bulldogs. Georgia Bulldogs, not Mississippi State Bulldogs.
Yeah, now if Texas and Texas A&M end up tied and Texas wins the head-to-head, does Texas go to the championship game, or what's the tiebreaker if there's 3 teams all with 1 loss?
If there's 3 teams, well, that's a good question. I don't know what the tiebreaker is. So I would that's certainly a possibility. I don't know at this point how that's going to pan out. I do have enough questions about Texas at this point that I didn't have earlier. They follow up that loss to Georgia with a not very convincing win over Vanderbilt, even though they kind of had the game in the bag for a while, and then it kind of got away from them at the end. And Vanderbilt is better, and they are better at quarterback than they've been in a while. So those, they're a ranked team, so that's not a big issue. But you would like to see them bounce back a little stronger after a loss like that. You think they'd have something they wanted to prove. Sure. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this ends up in the final stages of this season. But as I noted earlier, this has been a terrific college football season. Some of it because of the contraction that you have from these realignment, and you're playing. When would you have ever had Ohio State playing at Oregon in the middle of the season before?
No, it's great.
That wouldn't have happened before.
It's been absolutely great. The other chief takeaway I had from this weekend is, and you were up in the press box swaying in College Station, so you probably couldn't see all that clearly. But I think that Brian Kelly's chief asset as LSU head coach is that he's really good at chewing out his players in game.
Yeah, that's what I couldn't tell. I heard that. I heard about it later. He's not a popular coach. People at LSU, even before that game was over, I was looking on Twitter, and LSU people were complaining about him. It was a strange hire for LSU to hire Brian Kelly. Not from a standpoint of he's a great coach. I think that he's a winner. He wins wherever he goes. He's a smart guy. It's just the personality and the way that he handles things. He's got a little bit of Gary Patterson in him, and I don't think that thing flies anymore.
I don't know that motivation by fear in the middle of a game, and David, maybe you can speak to this better than I, but I don't know that motivation by fear and by chewing out a player in this day and age is going to get you better performance in game for sure.
There are generational teaching approaches that change over time and are more effective based on where the culture is and what's accepted. And the coaching by fear image that was so prevalent when we were growing up, especially in football, is just not there anymore. And it's not just, and even if it does work to a certain extent in the moment in games, you're not going to win recruiting wars with it. You're just not.
For sure, you're not.
And it's not just the players who aren't going to want to be part of that. It's going to be their families are saying, no, we're not going to put you in that situation.
No, you can't do that. I will say this, and that was something I'm going to write this week in a column about Mike Elko, is that one of the players after the game was asked about Elko's impact on the Aggies this season. And he said, when he walks into the room, everybody sits up, and everybody's ready to listen because this guy knows football and they respect him. It's not fear, it's respect.
Yes.
And I think that's what he has been able to do there today. And I have to say, I was not crazy about the hire. When they did him, it sounded to me like they were just doing the same old thing they want to do. We want an Aggie kind of guy because he had been there before as a defensive coordinator, so they knew him, and that's why they wanted him to come back. And but I tell you what, he's really done something there. They got a great defense. They're playing very well. If they had a really effective quarterback now, for all I know, they could run this thing anyway. But they'd really be something if they were getting great play at quarterback. Now this team would be, it would
blow the minds off Longhorns if in their first year in the SEC, Texas A&M finally makes an SEC championship game.
I know the whole thing is so crazy. It was like first we were all thinking that this is the Aggie nightmare. Texas comes into the SEC the first year and they dominate it. And then all of a sudden, right in the middle of the season, it's like, oh no, it's flipping.
I've thought about that poetic justice and how that would play out. It's that would be quite the storyline.
Well, it's going to make for a great football game on the Saturday after Thanksgiving. I'll say that. Anyway. I'm looking forward to that. I'll be down there for that one, and that'll be a lot of fun. People are going to lose their minds for that game. And I tell you what, I wrote that I almost needed Dramamine just to type that column from Kyle Field the other day, and that was not an exaggeration. The constant bobbing of that press box, I tell you what, after a while, it starts to get to you a little bit, and that thing is going to be moving on November the 30th. I'm predicting that for sure. All right, that's going to do it for our podcast this week. We thank you for coming in and listening. We'll be back next week to see if, the Cowboys could win a game and maybe make something happen.
Oh, sorry.
We can start talking about baseball offseason then, because the World Series will definitely be over, as if it's not at this moment. But
it is almost for the Aggies. Yeah, well, you're down 3-0. It's over. You're not winning 4 games.
Well,
you might win 1 or 2 or maybe even 3, but you're not winning 4 games.
There's never been that happen in the World Series. So, and listen, I mean, Freddie Freeman's on a heater right now, and it's been fun to watch. So we will talk about Rangers next week and what inactivity they will do during the offseason.
Yes, that's correct. So from everybody in here to everybody out there, thanks, and we'll see you next time.